Have you ever had a falling out with someone, whether it be like a past relationship or a friendship or a family member, a relationship with someone that kind of dissolved and you didn't really necessarily get closure, but you find yourself constantly like thinking about them, wondering about them, reliving this past trauma or this past experience? Our brain basically likes to hold on to things, and it will constantly bring up things that haven't been filed away. I like to think of our brain as little tiny people, kind of like in that SpongeBob episode where there's like all these filing boxes and we have to file things away. Well, that's how I kind of view our brain, where there are categories, there are people, there are relationships, there are events that constantly are getting filed away. And when we have something that wasn't closed, that a chapter wasn't closed with a person or an event or some trauma that wasn't necessarily finished or closed all the way or healed, we kind of keep that in the middle of the room, and it doesn't really necessarily know where to go because we haven't addressed it. And what I want to share with you guys today is how I have learned how to close this chapter with people, with trauma, with situations, with events in my past. And the process that I'm going to share with you guys has really just helped me to move forward. It's helped me to feel a lot lighter. It's helped me to feel like I'm not carrying so much trauma from the past. And it's also helped me with understanding other people and seeing it from their point of view, and really just validating my experience without having the need to continuously go back and relive that trauma over and over. We don't realize this, but traumas can constantly affect us to the point that it's like constantly in our energetic field. It'll affect the way that we show up in our relationships. It'll affect how we show up in our life. And honestly, sometimes it can be a form of self-sabotage if we choose not to address it. And at the end of the day, we just deserve healing. We deserve to love ourselves. We deserve to be able to move forward without carrying the heaviness of the past. And honestly, we can't create if we're constantly living in a place of unhealed trauma from the past. We deserve to be able to create from a really free, expansive, healed, energetic space. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the process. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to feel and process my emotions. Now, this is something that is going to be really, really challenging because like as humans, we are taught that feeling our emotions makes us weak. We're taught in society that we have to suppress our emotions in order to show up in our relationships, in order to show up for our jobs, in order to show up and perform just like as a human. We're kind of expected to be just perfect like robots, honestly. And I think that that's honestly something that's really hard to do. I have found, because I'm such an emotionally led person, that it's really hard for me to function day to day when I do suppress my emotions because they're constantly wanting to come out. And I've noticed that when I continue to suppress them, it just builds up and builds up and builds up until I eventually explode. And so what you want to do is you want to really get to a place to where you can allow them to explode and allow them to come out. And it's going to be challenging at first because the thing about your brain is that when you relive a memory, when you think about a traumatic event from the past, your brain doesn't know the difference between a memory and from what's happening right now. So if you're constantly replaying the same story, if you're constantly thinking about this event that happened to you, your brain sends a response to your body, and it tells your body like, this is happening right now. This is happening, you're unsafe, you need to get to safety. And because you have that emotional connection, you get into this fight or flight response. But the thing about processing your emotions is when you're able to do it in a really healthy way, you're able to get them out, because emotions are just energy in motion and they need to be able to get out in order to flow. So what I like to do is I like to honestly, personally, I like to schedule a time when I know that I need to release something. I can usually tell within my body when I'm really holding on to something and I need to release something. So what I do, and I'm going to recommend this to everyone, honestly, because it's easier to just schedule it rather than just be like, I'm going to do this in my house with everyone around. Because honestly, having your own space where you're uninterrupted, where you're quiet, where you have this moment to yourself is going to be easy, because sometimes it's not cute. Sometimes it's really ugly when you let your emotions out. And so scheduling that time for yourself where you're like, I'm putting my phone on do not disturb. You tell everyone in your household, hey, I need this time alone. So they either leave, or you just go into a room by yourself, or you just take that time maybe in your car or outside in nature or something like that. Just taking that time out where you're like, I am letting all distractions go away and I'm taking this time for myself. For one, that tells yourself like, oh, I'm putting myself first, I'm filling my own cup, but it also says like, this is important to me. So what I do first is I sit down and I write a letter. Now, this letter is going to be to the person that wronged me. It's going to be either to the situation. Sometimes it's to myself, however I'm feeling in the moment. But I like to write a letter where I get everything out. I get every ugly, every hateful, every mean, every spiteful, every resentful, every shame-filled word I may be too afraid to say out loud. I get it onto paper. There's literally nothing holding me back. If I am coming off in a terrible way, it doesn't matter, because this is a letter that I'm writing and it's not for the other person to read. Do not send this letter. This is just like me getting emotions out. I've always been someone that really benefits from writing, but I feel like specifically in this situation with this healing method that I'm telling you now, writing is going to be the best way to get it out, because sometimes when you do schedule like time for you to get your emotions out, or you set aside time, like I do this when I get off work sometimes. I'm like, I'm gonna wait until I get off work to go ahead and get this all out. Writing will be that modality that will be able to trigger whatever it is that you need to get out, so that you can start to feel those emotions. Because sometimes you can schedule it, and I've tried this before where I've tried it opposite ways, where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna just rage shake it out and I'm gonna get mad and scream into a pillow, and then I schedule it and I'm like, well, I don't really feel anything yet. You have to just get into that moment where you are reliving the moment, you are feeling that traumatic triggering response, and you're letting it come out and you're letting it rise up, and you're starting to feel it. Because I'll start writing and I'll start crying. My body will physically start releasing when I start to write things out. And so I get everything out, every bad thing I want to say, and I continue and I continue and I continue. And then I stop and I kind of just like assess where I feel at that moment. So if I finish writing and I feel like I've gotten everything out, then I'm like, okay, I feel, I'll feel it. I'll feel lighter. I'll feel more weightless. I'll feel pretty good. But sometimes I'll notice if there's still more that I need to release, or still more that I need to say. I'll finish writing and then I'll be like, and another thing, and I'll have more to say. Or sometimes I'll write it out to a person from my past, and then I'll be like, actually, I need to write a letter to myself now. Continue to write, continue to get it out, purge it all out of your system. So then once you've gotten it out of your system, you feel like you've gotten everything purged, you're going to get rid of the letter. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna rip it up, you're gonna burn it, flush it down the toilet, get it out of your house physically, because I take that very seriously. Like, I'm like, if I write this letter and I just keep it around, keep it near me, keep it on my nightstand, keep it wherever, that energy is still there. Like, I haven't physically released. And it's not necessarily that like ripping it up or burning it is going to like immediately dissolve it from your energy, but it's a symbolic act. We forget that as humans, physical action is needed to back up our manifestations. Physical action is needed, inspired action is needed in order for us to move forward. So that physical action of you ripping it, that physical action of you burning it is symbolic in itself. That physical action of you flushing it down the toilet, or the physical action of you taking it out, walking it outside to the trash, that is what is really necessary to say symbolically, this is no longer welcome in my life. I have gotten this out and I've taken it out of my house. Along with that, once you have physically removed it, you're going to evaluate what's necessary next. So sometimes if I feel like physically, because I'll do this sometimes where I will physically remove it and I'll be like shaking. I'll realize I want to shake my body. I want to jump up and down. Sometimes a part of me writing is me screaming into a pillow. Sometimes I have literally thrown my pillow against my bed and just continued to beat my bed or punch my bed. Something like that. Like, sometimes a physical action is required with it. I'll alternate between writing and screaming. No judgment here. Sometimes there's a little bit extra, but if you feel much more weightless from writing this letter, then you're ready to move on to the next step. Now, this next step is going to be the hardest part. I know that probably getting all of your emotions out, if you're not used to feeling your emotions, if you don't really allow yourself to sit and think about things or feel your emotions, that was probably hard. But I would say this next step is going to be the most difficult part, but it's going to be the most necessary step. So the next step is really just like neutralizing the situation and neutralizing the person from the past. And this may require a pen and paper again. I feel like I really benefit from writing it down, and your mind is really going to benefit. I like to think of our mind as like jumbled up yarn, or like the boxes that I was talking about earlier, where you really need to physically like set things aside and categorize things, because our mind really likes to be able to put things in certain places. And what you need to do is you're going to have to write about this situation, probably a pros and cons chart, a positive and negative chart, because what you need to do is you need to neutralize how you feel about things. Already, like, we can already guarantee, right, that you feel some pretty negative emotions. You feel there are probably a lot of really bad things about this experience. You probably feel like, yeah, this sucks a lot. So what you have to do is you have to look at how this experience benefited you in some way. Your goal is to feel very neutral about this situation and very neutral about this person. So the situation itself, how did this benefit me? How am I a better person from this? What good thing came from this experience? And you're gonna have to, as many equally bad things that you feel, you're gonna have to find as equal amount of good benefits from it, because you want to have that balance and that neutrality. And then you're gonna wanna do the same thing for the person. And I know that is really, really hard, because I have people in my past that were very abusive, that were not great people, and that honestly really hurt me. And that was really hard, because yes, there are a lot of bad qualities with this person and this experience and how they treated me. But I have to, in order to move forward, I have to be able to look at the good qualities of them. But not only that, I have to come to a place of understanding for them. So while I'm balancing that, I have to see, like, what is their perspective of this? Okay, well, maybe they acted like this because their inner child was really unhealed and they didn't get the attention that they were desiring as a child, so they constantly had to seek that out in life later. Maybe this situation happened because they constantly feel like they're never being heard, and the only way they could feel that they were being heard is by treating me like this. Maybe there's the little boy or the little girl within them that's treating me like this, that just wants to be loved. Now, with that being said, I know that it's going to be really hard, because I struggled with this. I struggled to try to see it from their perspective, to try to see from a loving perspective, to try to see them from an understanding perspective. Now, I'm going to just interject with this and say that when you are trying to understand these feelings and trying to come from an understanding place, it's going to be, especially if you're a very empathetic person, it's going to be kind of triggering for you in a way that you may find yourself thinking, wow, I actually can see from their perspective, or I actually understand why they did what they did. And that may trigger you to feel like you need to reach out to them, or like you need to reconcile, or maybe you start to feel guilt for yourself. That's not the point of this. Just because you can have empathy for someone and understanding and love for someone, that doesn't mean that there's a necessary reconciliation. I have made that mistake in the past, where I have really done a lot of healing on my own part, and then I've seen things from the other person's perspective, and I have tried to make peace with them, because I was like, well, I understand them now. I feel love for them now. I understand where they were coming from. And I realized after reaching out to them that just because I had grown and I had healed and I had changed, it didn't mean that the other person did. With that being said, when you do this healing work, when you do this healing process, the energy changes within you almost immediately. Almost immediately, other people are going to notice how much lighter you are, how much better you feel, how much more free and expansive and beautiful your aura really is when you start to do this healing work. And it's not necessary to go back to the past. It's not necessary to reconcile with people or have that physical closure. You can have closure on your own when you just choose to do the healing work yourself. And the last step that I take for this closure is I just express gratitude. I express gratitude for the work I just did. I express gratitude for the situation, for the other person. I express gratitude for who I have become. I express gratitude for the power that I have to actually do healing work, and the power that I have and the strength that it takes in order to feel things. Because honestly, that is not easy. And if you are willing to do that work, if you are willing to relive a past trauma, if you're willing to forgive someone, if you're willing to take responsibility and not feel a victim of your circumstance, of this person, not feel a victim of your environment, that is true work, and that is true change, and that deserves to be celebrated. Sometimes gratitude is really just like being really proud of yourself, being proud of yourself for being willing to put in the work, because not everybody in this world is willing to put in that work, but you did. And sometimes I like to pray. Sometimes I just like to just be really proud of myself. I think of all the things that I'm grateful for. I think of how this experiences have shifted me and how I'm really changing the world around me just by changing myself. I'm changing my future children's lives. I'm changing my life. I'm changing my family. I'm doing all of this work just by coming back to myself and healing myself. Now, I will say that this process is something that isn't going to work the first time, every single time, but I will tell you that when you do this, it is going to change your life, because you're going to already notice a difference. So with that being said, I have done this so many times for the same situations, the same people, and I have done it so many times to the point that every single time I do it, it feels less hard. It feels like there's less for me to write out. It feels like there's less for me to get out. It feels like there's less that's pent up in me. And so the very first time that I've done this for people in situations, I was like, wow, this is actually an amazing shift. And then I noticed like something else would come up and something else would come up, and I'd release them when they did come up, but every single time I felt lighter. Honestly, that's how it is with everything in your life. That's how it is with healing in general. We see that physically when we have physical ailments and we heal. It's not always the first time. It's not always one day. It's not always one step. Sometimes it takes multiple days. Sometimes it takes multiple sessions in order for you to heal yourself. You just have to have patience, and you have to be willing to put in the work. There are traumas that are so deeply rooted within us that sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it's okay, because once you start that energy work, you can never go back. It starts to really heal your inner child. And once you start to heal your inner child and start to have that love for yourself, you'll notice that the people around you will start to change. The people around you will start to heal as well. But ultimately, this work is less about the people around you and really just about the person inside of you, the inner child inside of you. Because at the end of the day, your only goal in this world is to feel good and to feel good about yourself. Here's to feeling good about yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any comments, leave me a comment. Please like this video, share it with a friend, and let me know if you've tried this method and if it works for you, or anything additional that could help someone with their healing journey. I will see you again soon. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.